The people have been long suffering here with us. Now let's get to what they want to hear, which is, what do people in heaven do all day?
What are they doing? Yeah.
What do they do all day? As Heaven Hell 387. We know why they do it. We know how they feel about it. What do they do?
What are they actually doing? Yeah.
There is no way to list all the functions that people have in the heavens. The end. Goodbye.
Thank you for tuning in.
Or to describe them in detail. Though it is possible to say something on the subject in general terms, they are innumerable and vary depending on the roles of the communities as well. In fact, each community plays a unique role, since the communities differ depending on their virtues and therefore on their function. This is because virtues for everyone in the heavens are virtues in act, which are functions. Everyone there does something specifically useful, for the Lord's kingdom is a kingdom of uses.
That's cool. So what I hear in there is that it's community based, for one thing. Like you might go to this community and it functions this way, and you have these positions in it. This one's different.
Yeah.
And what that whole community is doing for everybody else differs quite a bit. So I was thinking, yeah, you could have some group that's just so compassionate. It's so good at the love thing. And then you get some other group that's really wise and insightful, and other people who just, like, if you want something done, give it to them. They'll do it like a rhino. They're going to go in there and get that done.
How are human beings supposed to live? In what way are we supposed to gather in civilization? You're supposed to, in the divine design, you live in communities. Elsewhere in his writings, source, Swedenborg will say some people do live alone and they're doing something there. But in general,
that's right.
So if you don't like people, okay, we can figure out something for you. In general,
yeah, and they have the outreach to more communities.
That can be quite good.
Yeah.
Okay, now that our lawyers wanted us to say that.
Yeah, that's right.
In general, you live in communities with people, but the communities are not just people who are around you. You're all doing something constructive together. Communities formed around use. So almost like a company, or like or people that a region in the world where everyone's kind of into this certain field, or there's clusters of. That's the way it is in heaven, which is, again, we're using the human body as an example. You've got your kidney. It's like it's a bunch of different people in there doing different things, but they're all together in the business of purification. Yeah.
So even in this world, I think about the fact that you may get all these botanists all over the world, and they may be living in this physical community over here, that community there. When they have their meetings and they all get together, they recognize each other, like that is their community, is the community of botanists. Like the heavenly one is more like that than this suburb where they happen to live next door to an electrician or someone who does something different.
Definitely the internet is a lot like the spiritual world, or the internet is making the physical world operate a lot like the spiritual world.
More like the spiritual world. Absolutely right.
The good parts of the internet, because yes, here now you can be in community. You can even be working with people who are anywhere in the world, but they share your affinity. That's what draws you together.
That's the basis of the community. Yes, and loving similar things.
There are many services in the heavens, just as there are on earth, since there are ecclesiastical, civic, and domestic affairs there.
Okay, broad brush painting now, right? Yeah.
All the communities in the heavens are differentiated according to their forms of service, because they are differentiated according to their virtues, as has been noted above. Their virtues are virtues in actions or acts of thoughtfulness, which are services. There are some communities whose tasks are to take care of babies.
That is great.
There's something. Give us something tangible. There are some communities whose tasks are to take care of babies. There are other communities whose tasks are to teach and lead children while they are growing up.
Okay, so that first group is not even really, sounds like it's not talking about education. It's really talking about
I'm talking about
care, the way that you
babies,
holding the the kids, taking care of their needs and all that. Yeah.
It's this build up of, whoa, heaven, and there's communities, and that's going to be so important in these hierarchy. What's the most important thing? Babies.
First on the list.
Human beings.
Taking care of the young.
Human beings. That is what God cares about. Don't get it twisted. Don't get confused that there's something else. That human beings, caring for human beings. There are other communities that look after young boys and girls who are well disposed because of the way they were raised in this world and have come straight to heaven, where they are taught and raised in much the same way.
So these are children who've died as children. Boom, they're in that other world. And so you get teachers, their education continues, and
There are some that teach simple people from the Christian world and lead them on the way to heaven. And there are some that do the same for various non-Christian peoples.
Now it's interesting that he would single out. So he said simple in there. That's interesting because often that's a term that he uses for the uneducated. I mean, at his time period, you had just a certain slice of society where, your parents had enough money that you got to go to school or something like that, and so you'd get educated. Those were the ones who would know Latin and, get government positions or work in the courts or be in the hierarchy of the church and so on. And then you got all these sort of ordinary folk or whatever you call them, just sort of normal people. So interesting that's a whole category. It's like working with those people. That's one of those functions. That's great.
Swedenborg, coming from a very educated upper class background, is pretty high on those simple people.
Yes.
Because I think what he found in the afterlife is the more conceited you are and the more sure of yourself, the harder it is to teach you anything.
Yes.
Whereas as simple...
And you do more damage too because people listen to you because you have an authority. No reference to this show, but
So I would think that people, what he would call simple people coming in from the Christian world or from the non-Christian world, there's communities that are specifically suited to teaching those people because generally they're teachable. So it's easier to get you into heaven.
Often he said their instincts are better about, like they would have a clearer idea. You might talk to a learned person from his time period about what happens after death, and they say, well, you lie in the grave until the last day, and then the trumpet shall sound, and then this will happen, and that will happen. But you talk to, just an ordinary person who's doing farming or care for the elderly or whatever it is, and they say, oh, I think like right after you die, I think grandma's in heaven looking down on us, and they have a much more accurate idea
because it's the truth. So the societies of people who are suited to teaching those people are different than the societies who would be suited to teaching non-Christian people, are different than the societies who would be suited to teaching highly educated people from whatever background, and because people have different things in the way of heaven that you got to get around for them.
Yeah, and it does sound from other passages like people do work on quite specifically dialing in, okay, people from this religion. We'll talk to people because they have certain folders in their head, like this particular denomination really goes in for this concept of, justice or this other one's all about compassion. And so, we use whatever they've got. Let's use that for their education to take them to the next level.
There are some that protect new spirits just arrived from the world from the attacks of evil spirits.
That is awfully nice.
And there are some who attend to people in the lower earth.
Yes, now the lower earth, maybe some people haven't heard about this, but Swedenborg says it's based on Bible passages that talk about the pit or the lower realms or the depths, out of the depths, I cried to the Lord. It's a place where you may have some connection with the divine, but you also have these falsities that are kind of holding you back temporarily. And so it's quite close to hell, but it's not in hell. But interesting that that's a whole group of like, we need to care for these folks who are in this kind of vulnerable situation because they have a lot of misinformation in their heads, and we need to work with them,
Yeah.
you know,
Uh,
and keep them safe from, because some of the things that they think might be pretty nasty, and so there's influence from the hells around, but keeping them safe from that.
It might sound strange and arbitrary, but again, the human body is the example for it. So he says over and over that heaven is like a person. Heaven is like a person.
Yeah.
And the process of going from this world into that person is just like the process of food goes through.
So bizarre the first time you hear it, like the first 20 times.
Yeah,
But it starts to make sense after a while.
enjoy
Yeah.
this. If this sounds really bizarre, enjoy this, because pretty soon it's going to start making all the sense in the world. So you have the divine design where in the image and likeness of God, it's every single person's wearing it. This is the best system that exists. It's the system that heaven. So there's different kinds of food. There's different kinds of molecules. There's like simple sugars, and there's complex carbohydrates, and there's protein, and there's fat. All of those things. There's roughage.
things
There's fiber.
Probably shouldn't have eaten. all kinds of things.
There's
right?
many things that you shouldn't have eaten. So those all have a different route to getting in the body. There's some, he even talks about some very simple sugars can even be absorbed almost directly into the bloodstream, right?
From the lips, just like straight in.
Then there's some stuff that needs to go through the different layers of the intestines and things.
Some need to be ground by the teeth.
Just like if heaven is the place where you love to do what's good, you don't want to harm anyone, you don't want to be better than anyone, you're happy to be almost like in this childlike reverence for the Lord. How far is each person from that? We all have our different distance from that. What are you going to need to go through to get to where you'll open up to that heaven? Different people need different things, and you see that here in these different communities. Some kids who die young for whatever reason in Providence, they're like already on this path, so they can be taught. And there's other people who are simple in a certain way, so they can be taught. Some people need to go into this lower earth sort of processing, digestion, where they need to get shaken up. Swedenborg went through this while he was still in the world. He had his whole journal of dreams time when he was really getting hammered and freed from his ego.
Boy, that's a great point.
He was getting.
You see him. He was in the washing machine there.
So they need to go through that. Okay, great. And then they'll do that. And there needs to be, in order for that process to happen, there needs to be a ton of angels who all know how to facilitate that process and watch over you and move you to where you need to go.
And don't the near-death experiences, most of them talk about angels, whatever you want to call them, beings of light, or that there are these helpers, these guides. Like, it seems like they're virtually always a fixture in these near-death experiences. Isn't that right?
That's right.
And so Swedenborg, that's their job. You know, they know they know you're having a near-death experience, and they're part of the crew that helps people in that situation. You know,
why do we need to do work in the first place? It's because, as we said, like in the first quote of this episode, that's how the divine design happens. You hear, God runs life. God runs life through his providence. How does he do that? He does it through angels. And the only way you can actually be part of that plan without messing it up, everything has to go just so perfectly. All these little blood vessels and things need to move. Everything needs to move in sync, and the cell division, all that stuff needs to go so perfectly. You can't be part of that team unless you're with the program.
Yeah.
You got to get in the mind. And then once you're with the program, then God can I can entrust you with certain parts of this plan because I know I can carry them out through you. So that is the whole reason why you got to get in the right mindset. This is how God runs life, is through those people who are willing to give everything to the plan. There are some, his angels' jobs, there are some who attend to people in the hells and control them so they do not torture each other beyond set limits. So this is like a step below the lower earth, where you're really resistant to good and truth and you're really choosing this life of hell, well, we're going to be right in there with you, and we're going to make sure that maybe if you're engaged in your evil and you attack someone, there's a retribution on you, but we're making sure that that doesn't ever go beyond what will help amend you, so there's no needless suffering. We just it's a grisly business, but it's like this is when there's acute evil here. We need to figure out a way to mitigate this. It takes a specialist.
You want angels doing that work.
Not
Better to have angels
not in doing
that work,
the harming, but in mediating the people in hell, trying to control their insanity, trying to make it so that they don't get worse.
So that's going too far. Yep. Allowing a certain amount that might be useful, and knowing from the Lord, okay, yeah, some of this they've got coming. I mean,
we can't prevent them.
We can't prevent a certain amount of the consequences of their own actions and coming back on them. But that's too far. You're not allowed to just tear that person. So they shut that down. They know how to do that.
Well, it's just what we were talking about before. That the do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You can get to a point if you really embrace this crazy I matter and you don't, to where you would gladly, steal people's livelihood to get that money, and not even though that leaves them wounded and destitute.
Not worry a bit about that. Yeah.
There's all manner of things in which you'd start to be willing to do to other people. How are you ever going to get to that golden rule of do unto others as you would have them, unless you come to understand, if you won't listen to anything else, you've got to understand how this feels. You've got to experience that happening to you to wake you up out of this thing.
I imagine the angels who are working with those evil spirits don't even feel like you're completely different from me. They know their own